Greg, quick, look up in the sky. Is that a bird? Is that Superman?
No, Brian. That's a drone. Welcome, everybody, to the 6th episode of the Broken Speaker Podcast. My name is Greg, and I'm joined by my co-host and brother, Brian. This is the podcast where we talk about cool things in our world while sipping on some delicious brews. In today's episode, as you may have heard, we are taking to the skies. Drones are becoming more common and useful in our modern age, opening a world of possibilities. Do you fancy being a high-speed drone race pilot? How about a professional freelance photographer? Or are you the heroic type looking to save some lives? Before we break down some of the most insane uses for drones in our world today, let's break out some brews. Brian, what are you drinking on today?
So today, I have chosen, it's called Before Noon, and it's a space in between. Actually, wait a minute, hold on. I've just noticed this. This is crazy. On one side of the can it says Before Noon. On the other side of the can it says Afternoon. But it is an Imperial Java Stout, brewed from the Santa Fe Brewing Company in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'm going to have to look up the actual name of this beer. It's a very simple can. It's basically a brown can with a coffee cup on the Before Noon side and a beer mug on the Afternoon side. But it's an ale brewed with coffee beans. And it says, not for use with donuts. It's a little bit of humor there. Otherwise, I have no idea about this beer. I'd have to do a lot more research online. So I didn't do the research. I'll upload that in the De Beers post that we post on the blog afterwards. But it really intrigued me that there was not a lot of information on the can for this beer. So, that being said, I'm going to give this a shot. But Greg, why don't you tell us what you're drinking today?
Sure. Before I go into my beer, I just want to make a point here. I think I know what the can's going for. You can drink it before noon as a coffee or afternoon as a beer. It's kind of like the daily beer.
I like that. I like that. I think that I could definitely use that as an excuse. Maybe I'll try that at work next time. I mean, if I put it in a beer mug, it's like, afternoon. And if I put it in my coffee cup, then, it's before noon. So nobody can ever say anything to me. I'm set either way.
Yeah, okay. You try that and tell me how it works.
Yeah, let's be honest. I like my job. I'm not going to be trying that anytime soon.
Exactly. But so what I'm chosen to drink today is Not Your Father's Vanilla Cream Ale. Now, this is brewed with Madagascar vanilla, and it's supposed to be kind of more of a soda, but alcoholic. I mean, I guess we'll see how it goes. I've had one Not Your Father's before, but not this vanilla cream ale. So we'll see how this is. It might be sweet, might be delicious. I don't know. But the reason I picked it is because there's an aviator on the front. A very old-timey guy with a thick mustache and some aviator digs. Got some goggles and I guess a hat on as well. So anyways, it's kind of sky-themed, pilot-themed, although today the topic we're talking about is no pilots. So anyways, that's the brew I'm drinking.
Awesome. Let's now get into our beer enrichment fact of the week, Greg.
Hit me with it.
So we're going to go north of the border, kind of closer towards you. Have you ever heard of Canadian ice beer?
No, I don't think I have. What is it?
So Canadian ice beer, it was really big in the 90s. By the way, before I get into this fact, I just want to point out that I'm getting this fact from the National Geographic Atlas of Beer by Holst, Poland, and Patterson. The same publication that I got it from last week. Again, if you guys like any of these facts and you guys want to hear more of these facts, go ahead and check out this book. It is phenomenal. It's quickly becoming one of my favorite books and favorite references for cool beer facts. But, again, Canadian ice beers, all the rage in the 90s. And a lot of people think that ice beer is specifically from Canada. It's a brewing technique where basically you freeze some of the beer, and then you take that off and you add a little bit of fresh water. The result is a higher alcohol beer, and the bittering agents that you get from some of the products like the hops or the grain husks are actually removed, and that's it makes for a higher alcohol beer, and it's not as bitter. So a lot of people like it. It's easy drinking. However, this technique was not created in Canada. It was actually created in Germany, like a lot of brewing techniques. And the legend of this is that in the 1890s, it was by accident. So a young brewery worker who was pretty tired from his long day of brewing beer accidentally left a couple kegs of beer outside. And he came back the next day, and the beer was actually frozen. So they opened them up, and they tried to take the beer out, and the head brewmaster was really upset. So he took the ice out, and the remaining liquid, he made the young brewer drink because he was angry, and he was like, we're not going to waste this. Well, what they ended up deciding was this was actually pretty good. And they decided that it would become a new brewing technique, and it quickly became known as the Eisbock style. And so that is kind of the predecessor of Canada's ice beer. And that's how we got the ice beer brewing that we have today. So there's your enrichment fact of the week of the podcast. And again, just trying to further beer culture and beer society here.
That's insane. That's an awesome story, Brian. I really like that. I'll have to go look for I guess Natty Ice. Is that a Canadian ice beer or whatever?
So any of the beers nowadays that you go to a liquor store and you see ice in the name, you're gonna that's gonna probably be an ice beer. I don't know. You'd have to check with the specific breweries to see whether they do true ice brewing. Because I think there's a lot of techniques that they use today, that modern techniques that kind of get around having to freeze the beer. I have to do a little bit more research with that, but it'd be interesting if you could find an ice box, so EIS and then BOCK, because I feel like that would probably be a more traditional ice beer, which is that style they created in Germany. I'm sure that you can find a true ice beer in the liquor stores today, even though they're not as popular as they were in the 90s.
All right, cool. Well, I'll keep an eye out for that.
How's your beer before we head on to our topic, Greg?
This vanilla cream ale is incredibly smooth, and it's worrisome because it's going down so quickly. I might not have any by the end of the podcast, which is a good thing and maybe a bad thing, which I guess it just means be careful with these Not Your Fathers because they're so good to drink, but they're still alcoholic. You could probably get pretty tanked pretty quick.
How what's the alcohol content on that?
4.1%. It's not crazy high, but it's something.
Yeah, no. If you definitely finish a 6-pack, you'd be feeling a slight buzz, I'm sure.
Definitely. How about your coffee brew? What's it taste like?
Yeah, no, this is delicious. It's got a really strong coffee taste to it, so if you don't like coffee, probably not the beer for you, but it does say that it was brewed with coffee beans, so that's kind of expected. Greg, you and I have actually tried to make a coffee stout before.
That's right.
Yeah, and I believe that we went wrong because I used too much coffee beans.
Yes, it was basically caffeine craziness.
Yeah, so whatever they did, this is what I was going for. And this is probably, I might try to look a little bit deeper into how they make this, and maybe I can try to craft that coffee stout again sometime and be successful this time.
Awesome. That'd be a pretty cool brew, Brian. Okay, but let's go ahead and get into our topic, which we can kind of segue pretty well by talking about how if we do finish our beers and we drink maybe a couple more, we will not be able to fly drones in the state of New Jersey. Because that's right, drunk droning is officially a thing. The state of New Jersey passed a law in the late 2017, I think. And basically, you can't use a drone under the influence of alcohol, narcotics, or other hallucinogenics. So because of incidents that have happened with people flying drones and crashing into things, it's kind of like the first step of regulation. Nobody's going to be able to fly these things drunk, and if you do get caught or any sort of repercussion, it'll basically just be prison and some fines if you do get caught.
But something to also point out is that it's not just the drunk droning. Are we going to call it drunk droning?
Yeah, that's the official term
Yeah,
for
the
it.
drunk droning. The law that New Jersey actually put into place also talks about it bans people from flying a drone to surveil a prison, interfering with first responders, and the pursuit of wildlife. So they've obviously really taken a look at what things are ethically unsound in the droning world and kind of decided that this is a all-encompassing bill for at least the start of what they need to do to regulate droning.
Yeah, now, Brian, have you flown a drone or do you have a drone?
Personally, I have flown a drone. It's this little AC helicopter that goes up and down, and it is the most basic drone that you could possibly have. It's more of a toy, I'd say, than a drone. But I guess, what is the definition of a drone then?
So I guess technically the definition, which if you Google it, you'll find, is a remote control pilotless aircraft or missile. That's the definition we're looking for when we actually talk about the type of drone we're talking about today. So, I mean, realistically, we're not talking about missiles.
Well, I mean, once Best Buy starts selling missiles, I'm definitely going down there. I'm going to get the first drone missile that I can, because that's just going to be awesome.
That's a military application. I don't think you'll be able to afford the missile drone, bro.
Oh, everything turns into consumer product at some point.
Okay, all right. Well, that's a weird world we'll be living in if we get to that. But so yes, your little helicopter does count as a drone, I believe, because it's a pilotless aircraft, which, even though it's small, it's still an RC aircraft kind of thing. Now, the more traditional view of a drone is something along the lines of a quad rotor or four rotor drone that essentially flies, hovers, and has typically a camera underneath that you can use for photography. I've kind of got a couple variants of a more traditional drone that I own and have flown. They're still pretty hobby based, not really crazy into $1,000 plus drones that are used for photography or racing or anything like that. But I've got something that I can stick a camera on, connect it to my phone, fly it around a little bit. It has maybe a 10-minute battery life, and you kind of have some fun doing some flips and racing it around and seeing what's going on. So, I mean, I've got a little bit of an experience of how drones are used in our world today, but that's just kind of scratching the surface when it comes to things that people do or have done with drones in the world today.
Something about this whole thing, and you talked about the hobby aspect of it, but I think that to truly understand drones, we have to go back to its roots and how it was originally created, how they were originally created, the thought process behind it. Everybody always says that you can watch science fiction and you can get an idea of what the future is going to look like, because we're going to try to emulate science fiction novels or science fiction shows or movies as much as possible. And I think as far back, as the 90s, we started seeing, even maybe the 80s, we started seeing drones, these remote control or pilotless aircraft. I think the first introduction that I ever had to a drone was in the Terminator movies, the Skynet. I can remember vividly the scenes where there was this drone kind of going around, and it was all decked out for military purposes. And then we started seeing a lot of military action in the early 2000s on the TV, and they started talking about Predator drones and how Predator drones were being used to really fly missions where the cost was still the same, or if not a little bit more than a regular mission, a manned mission. But the, I don't know how to say this, the possible cost of human life was pretty much next to nothing. So it was safer for soldiers if we flew drone missions rather than manned aerial missions.
Yeah, I mean, in the military application, I believe the pilots are sitting halfway across the world, somewhere in the U.S., at an Air Force base, in some sort of getup that has all the connections and all the live feeds they need from the aircraft itself, launched from a base in a military hotspot. For example, I guess Afghanistan or Iraq, when those were the places we were using drones, or the Middle East. And so that's kind of the first instance a lot of people had to drones, was that military aspect. And it doesn't paint a great picture. It doesn't give drones a good idea of, everything that they can be used for. It really paints it as this machine of war and death. But nonetheless, people have taken what a drone is and what a drone can do and the technology around it, and they've started to do some pretty cool things with them in our everyday lives. I mean, I don't think anyone, unless you're living under a rock, can go out and say, I have never seen a drone and I don't know what they are. I mean, everybody's had exposure to it in some way.
Yeah, and I think one of the easiest ways, even if you don't own a drone, and I think one of the applications that droning has really brought to the mass public is photography and videos and stuff. I can remember the first time that I actually watched a drone video, I think, was, you know how Apple's creating that new, campus? And it's like this massive endeavor and stuff like that. Have you heard of that, Greg?
Yeah, the Infinity Campus or whatever they're calling it.
Yeah, the Infinity Campus. I watched, it was a hobby drone person, and they flew it up because Apple had created all these barriers and stuff so people couldn't take pictures of the construction going on. This drone enthusiast flew up this drone with his video camera, and he flew it over the entire campus. And he flew it over everything, kind of showing what the construction was looking like and stuff like that. And that was, I don't know if Apple meant it to be leaked or something like that, but that was the public's first view of this Infinity Campus. And that was, I think, the first time that I really started going, wow, drone footage is incredible. And I know that a little while ago, you and I were watching some, 4K drone footage of different beaches across the world?
Yeah, we were doing a little bit of a soul searching to see where we would want to go and get a good idea of what the place is like with our family. And we basically just Googled 4K drone footage of X beach, Y beach, anywhere that we were looking at. And more often than not, we came up with hits of basically amateur photographers with access to one of these drones that has something like a 4K camera, and they're basically flying this thing wherever, doesn't really matter, getting a good picture of the coastline or anything, even a city, and it basically paints a beautiful picture. It's insane because it's a bird's eye view of what we really are looking at. Now, you're never going to go to that beach and have that exact same view, I guess, unless you get a helicopter tour or have a drone for yourself. But it creates an enchanting image and, I guess, draw that a lot of people don't usually see or haven't seen until we have drones as a capability.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, so this is a, private photographer. They're using this as kind of just, a hobby, or they're taking these photos and probably selling them. And it just adds another aspect to what photography can do as a business. But I used to work in the marketing department of a very large company, and I can tell you that one of the things that we always had was we would have a set of photographers, and they were private contractors, but they would come out anytime we had an event or anytime that we needed stock photos taken of our facility. And these photographers came out and they'd have tons of equipment. And this is probably 4 or 5 years ago when this started, when I started actually seeing this. But one of their pieces of equipment was a drone. And they would use the drone to fly indoors. They would use the drone to get crazy different shots of a large event, an outdoor event. Or they just used the drone to get the perfect angle where, getting up on a ladder wouldn't work. So for the photography business, beyond a hobbyist photographer, a drone is a pretty valuable asset.
Yeah, I mean, it basically has become a tool for a lot of people and the work they do, and especially photography. You could even there's also an industrial application to all of this. Drones are not only used for photography when it comes to the business world. There's also people who use drones for surveilling power lines, or I guess technically there's a flamethrower drone that was seen in China to get debris off of power lines. And basically anything that you could think of where could you basically have a pilotless aircraft somehow manage to solve a problem in a location that is not usually reachable by humans without extreme amounts of, I guess, gear, such as like ladders or poles or something like that to get up there. They can probably make drones do all of that. So I guess for I just threw it out there, and I don't really expect most people to take a look at this, but there's video you can find of basically a flamethrower drone being used to remove debris off of power lines. It's not made up. This is an actual thing that they have outfitted a drone to do. And it's insane that this is like the thinking of people and the stuff they've been able to come up with for drones to do. It's pretty out there. Now, I mean, it's not hard to think of using this flamethrower drone to also attack people once the AI Skynet comes down and destroys everything. But I mean, if you have a purely industrial use for it, a lot of this stuff is actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, and speaking of purely industrial uses, you were talking to me the other day, Greg. Drones can be used in a variety of different applications, different industries, and one of them might be even, the Coast Guard. Can you just go into that a little bit more? Because you were the one that brought up that article to me. Yeah,
so there was an article that came out and an incident that happened quite recently in 2018 here. And it was in Australia at a beach in New South Wales. Basically, two swimmers, young swimmers, teenagers, had gotten into difficulties off the coast, and they were struggling to reach to make it back. And there were lifeguards patrolling the waters with a drone that had a camera to spot, I believe it's used to spot sharks as well as swimmers that are having issues. So basically it's a surveillance thing. But they spotted these two swimmers, and the drone itself is outfitted with a flotation device that can be dropped and deployed to swimmers in, I guess, dangerous situations as such. So that's exactly what happened. I identified that these swimmers were struggling, and it dropped the life-saving flotation device into the water. It inflated. The swimmers grabbed onto it, helped them stay afloat, and then they reached the shore later. So it's basically a quick response and surveillance drone that was used to save lives. And in this article, they're saying, essentially, if they had traditionally gone out in a boat to rescue these swimmers, it would have taken up to 6 minutes. But this thing did it in 70 seconds.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, why have we not been doing this more often? And why hasn't the technology advanced more? Because it's obviously got valuable uses. And if it can work on this beach, it can work on any beach. And realistically, the technology is there. The cameras are there. It just has to be used. It has to be utilized. So hopefully this story will kind of raise some interest in drones, and it might basically make it more viable to different beaches or different Coast Guard groups, anything that basically will make sure that they're using it to save lives. So there you go.
Yeah, I thought about this a lot, and I just personally, because I live in Colorado, I'm not near any beaches. However, you hear all the time about these backcountry skiers that get lost, or they get stuck on a slope that people can't reach. And how valuable would it be to have a drone that could drop supplies to these people that could increase their lifespan in these unforgiving environments and allow them to get rescued in an appropriate amount of time? Like this kind of life-saving aspect of drones, getting somewhere where people can't get quickly, is just, I think, actually going to be the next frontier. I think that, you could even use it on a ski slope or a regular ski slope. If you had a surveillance drone on a ski slope, because right now what they have is they have a bunch of ski patrol that has to ski from the top of the hill to the bottom of the hill, and sometimes they basically set up halfway through the hill and wait to hear, via radio, hey, there's this person, I guess they're about halfway up or they're near pylon 18 for the chairlift. They have to go find them. But how cool would it be is if, at the base of the mountain, they've got this kind of control room and they've got, 4 drones out on the mountain, and these drone operators could call in exactly where these injured skiers or snowboarders are. And then the ski patrol could go to them. I think that that's probably a very valuable resource these kind of resorts could implement fairly quickly. I don't think that the overhead would be that much for these drones in comparison to what the ski resorts are generally spending per day.
I mean, it's definitely not going to replace the need for any of the first responders, but it will help them to basically assess situations in a much more rapid fashion. And so, I mean, on the ski slope side, it's not going to be all sunshine and roses for drones at the moment, because there are some hurdles that will need to be passed before they can officially be used and before it's truly going to be helpful. One of the things is these drones, they can't fly forever. They don't have perfect cameras, and you also need a human behind the scenes monitoring the footage to basically assess the situation without having an actual person on the ground. So there is some give or take. It's not the perfect solution, but it definitely can provide benefits to any of these first responders.
Absolutely. And, let's just stay on the topic of industry real quick. And I'm going to bring us the connection to the cult of Amazon. And I don't think this one's going to be too much of a surprise to you, Greg, because...
No, I saw this coming from a mile away.
Yeah, because they've been talking about this for years. But Amazon has been for years now talking about drone delivery. So a drone flying your package to your front porch and dropping it off. Now, there are a lot of hurdles that it needs to overcome with this. Great idea. I think it's a great idea. However, I'll admit there are a lot of hurdles. But it's kind of cool that a company, a delivery company, is looking at using drones to improve the speed and reliability of getting your package there on time. Again, it's not going to be perfect because I think that they're also looking at trying to do it without having a man behind the controllers. They're trying to make it kind of autonomous. But I think that it's something that definitely I could see happening in the next 10 years is that, drones do deliver. And I think even like Domino's did a little commercial where they delivered a pizza via drone at one point. So they're not the only company, but Amazon and the great Jeff Bezos, I still haven't figured out how to pronounce his name properly, so I probably should, look that up. But he is looking into the applications of drones in his specific company. So it's just kind of cool how drones went from, military applications, and they're being used in consumer product companies and in life-saving applications all across the world, and even hobby applications. Like the drone reach is reaching so far. And I think the next logical step in the drone progression, which is already happening, is competition.
Yes. Have you ever heard of the Drone Racing League, Brian?
About a year ago, I was randomly flipping through channels on, I think, like a Saturday afternoon or something. And it was one of those random times of the year where there's no real sports on. And I flipped to ESPN, and they had coverage of the Drone Racing League on ESPN. So, and that blew my mind.
Yeah, so I was in a hotel, actually, in Washington, D.C., out of state, visiting with family, and we were taking a downtime. It was raining out, and we turn on the TV, and all of a sudden, there's drone racing. I was taken aback, just like you. People were professionally flying these drones with a first-person view setup. So basically, you have goggles on where you're seeing exactly what the drone is seeing and flying it through these insane courses. I mean, they're set up to be a little bit theatrical because that's what gets people interested, I guess. But they were it was a group of guys that were basically just zipping around this warehouse, and they were flying these drones upside down through these hoops around these pylons, and it was basically 4 minutes of breakneck speeds through a warehouse and into a finish line, which was basically a giant catch net to stop all the drones from flying further. So they basically just slam them into the finish line and try to get the fastest time. And there's this whole tournament system related to it. If you're ever interested in it, basically just Google Drone Racing League. And this is one of the more high-profile leagues that is available, that has, I guess, competitions and races going on. But there are smaller leagues, local leagues that run regional events. You can probably look around for a drone racing league. It doesn't have to be this one. But I mean, the people in this league are basically obsessed with speed and first-person view drone racing. They have set world records for how fast drones can go. They have one for 165.2 miles per hour as a drone flying through the air, which is insane. This tiny little plastic and probably carbon fiber thing with 4 propellers and a battery is shooting itself through the air at 162 miles an hour, which is that's pretty impressive if you ask me from a mechanical standpoint. But it's all very accessible because realistically the technology is there already, and you just have to do it. You'd have to buy it and build it, and you could do the same thing. You could go probably faster if you optimize it, of course. But yeah, so if you're ever interested in the Drone Racing League, the coolest part about it, I think, from what I've looked into, is you don't have to have a drone to try out. Right now they're doing 2018 tryouts, and basically there's a video game that you play. You download and you can play with an Xbox controller. You can use a drone controller, a little bit different, or a PlayStation, I think, controller, whatever. And you play this video game flying drones through courses, and you try to qualify and create times. And they basically created this very accurate simulator that you could use to practice without breaking thousands of drones and ending up having to cost yourself a small fortune. But basically, if you manage to get into the top 24 qualifying places, there's, I believe, a live tournament, all still on the simulator, where the winner is going to receive a $75,000 contract to fly for the DRL in 2018. So this is very real, very accessible, and very practical for people to be able to fly in these races and learn and practice and actually qualify and get into it. So, it's definitely taken that step, and it's definitely a real thing, and there's money behind it. So, there you go. If you want to be a drone racing pilot, high-speed racer, that's your ticket.
And that blows my mind. The fact that this kind of hobby, which, would you agree it's not even 10 years old now, Greg?
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, so 10 years, in give or take. 10 years, we've gone from it being, little remote control helicopters to a league that's being broadcast by one of the largest sports networks ever, and that you can get a contract for $75,000. Now, that might not seem like a lot to some people, compared to other sports. Like, you're not talking about the millions of dollars that football players are making. But when football started, people weren't making millions of dollars. And $75,000 is a lot of money. So, and I'm sure that these people who are doing this isn't their full-time job. If they get a contract to do $75,000, they probably have a day job, and this is their kind of afternoon hobby or whatever. So the fact that the money is behind these, I guess I'd call this a sport now. I think that we can officially call it a sport. That the money's behind this sport, and people are watching it, and the viewership is so great so quickly. I can only imagine how far this is going to go.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at any sort of racing sport, Formula One is the biggest and the best. I mean, it's all about technology, and it's a little bit more dangerous, of course, because, it's infinitely more dangerous because the person's actually in the vehicle. But it's the same thing. It's high-speed, technical driving over courses that are, well practiced, well learned. and it's showing the capability of the people piloting these aircraft as well as, driving the cars and how well they can traverse this course as fast as possible. It's definitely a sport, and I think it's only going to take off further in the future. I mean, it's not going away, obviously. They've got a 2018 season. It obviously did well in the 2017 season, and it's just going to go better from there. I mean, it's a sport. People like it. High speed. It's very intriguing. It's fun to watch.
So this is where I think that drone racing can go, and that it can go probably relatively quickly. And this is going to be with the technology that they can, I guess, use to advance the drones themselves. But I think that outdoor drone racing should be like the next frontier, because right now they've been doing a lot of warehouses and stuff, and everything's inside. But if you can create like an outdoor section of the drone racing league, like I still think the indoor section of the drone racing league is probably going to be the most popular because it's, short curves and that kind of stuff. Then you could start doing outdoor drone races around, memorable icons. Like you could do it on like the Washington Mall or something, and you could make...
Hey, Brian?
Yeah?
Go ahead, and I don't know if you want to Google it right now, but there is an outdoor drone racing course in Dubai already.
Of course it's in Dubai. Of course it's in Dubai.
Yes, it's this massive thing. It's very funky looking, and it's basically a huge 3D course of drone racing.
Well, then the future is here, everybody. The future has come, and I was wrong. I am behind on the times here. But no, I do honestly think that that's probably the next step. Like, make it more difficult. Make weather conditions matter. And it takes even more skill. Because, you think of, like, you brought up Formula One. The drivers have to know how to drive on a dry track versus a wet track. I don't think they'll fly drones in, wet conditions. But the drone drivers, the droneers... What do you call a person that drives a drone?
A drone pilot.
The drone pilot? I feel like there needs to be a cooler name for that. Maybe we can think of a cooler name at some point.
Droniac.
Droniac. They're going to come up with a cool name. Mark my words, they will come up with a better name. They probably already have, knowing my track record so far. But I think that, wind conditions, or even the type of air. Like, I know that pilots, like flying, like... if it's humid air versus, dry, arid air, it's going to be different flying conditions. That's going to really affect what kind of drone. I assume like different propellers, different speeds. They'd probably have different... I guess they could, upgrade their drones based on the weather conditions. And I could see, like, because, they've got different Formula One teams that, like, they have entire weather bases that are, seeing what the most optimal configuration for each car is. I could see that happening with the drones.
Yeah, I mean, that's another big point. Right now, weather is very, very difficult for drones to encounter. I mean, any sort of wind, rain, and you're going to have struggles the whole time. So, I mean, in the future, yep, there might be more technological advances that help us to encounter that, but for now, I think we have to just count on the warehouse races and maybe just watch it on ESPN. That'll probably be how we have to sacrifice for now.
I mean, yeah, it's still an awesome thing. I still think that this is really cool that it has taken off so quickly and has gained such a following in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, Greg, I guess it's that time in our podcast that we look at our last call. So what's your last call for this podcast?
My last call is my beer's out and I need another one, first off.
So you enjoyed it?
I finished it. Yes, I did enjoy it. It was delicious. But on the topic of drones, I think my last call is that there have been many technological advancements in the recent years, and drones have kind of scratched the surface of their capabilities. And from here, it's only going to get more and more insane. We're going to start seeing some cooler drones, some new applications, and it's only going to get cooler in the future. So who knows, maybe in a year we'll have another podcast to follow up about how much cooler drones were in 2018 than 2017. Now, how about you, Brian? What are your last calls?
You know what? I think I agree with everything you just said. On the topic of my beer is also finished, and I could drink the very sessionable beer. I could drink a couple of these. I think a lot of coffee stouts are kind of one and done, but this one is extremely drinkable, and it doesn't overpower your taste buds. So I will be drinking this and purchasing this one again. But on the topic of drones, I cannot wait to see where the future of drones is, both in industry and in this new budding sport that comes out. I love seeing competition, and I think that is going to be incredible. And the different, I guess, like ways that we're going to be able to modify the drones to be better, to be faster, to be more durable in different weather conditions. I'm excited to see that. But I'm also excited to see, that story about the Australian Coast Guard saving the swimmers and basically, saving their lives. I think that we are going to hear a lot more about the life-saving applications of drones in the future, probably within the next year. So I do think, in 2019, we're going to be able to do an entire other drone podcast and be able to talk about how far drones have come from this podcast. So it's just exciting. It's an exciting topic.
Yes, indeed. All right, well, that wraps up everything we had to cover today. Thanks for listening. This was the 6th edition of Broken Speaker. We do have a new format, so if you're still looking for us, check YouTube. There's a YouTube channel, and we're posting it all on our blog. But other than that, thanks for joining, thanks for listening, and have a good one.